Josh Trent, you are now on the Life Stylist podcast. Here you are, dude.
Thank you for having me. This is so cool.
It's funny, after doing 200 and something of these episodes, I always say, like, welcome to the show, Josh. So every time I start one now, I think, what's a more interesting way to start it? And I don't know if that qualified, but I'm at least going to come up with a different 6 words to say.
It makes me feel very welcome, though.
Well, you know what's funny is sometimes, I'm glad to hear that. What's funny is sometimes when I go on other people's shows, they just record all of the preamble and us chatting, and then I'll ask them, I'm ready to start whenever you are. And they go, oh, we started 10 minutes ago. This is the podcast. You do
that, yeah.
I don't know how to do that because I don't know what part to start. I did that on the Skinny Confidential, I think it's called Him and Her podcast. And they were asking me all this personal stuff, and we were kind of going really deep. And then I did that. I said, so, you guys ready to start? And they're like, oh, no, this is the thing. This is the show. It's like, oh, shit, okay.
Yeah, we're like 20 minutes in.
Yeah, so here we go. Maybe I'll try that sometime. So you got this very popular podcast called Wellness Force Radio, and you're kind of an OG. You got in the game before me. So I want to just first shout out your podcast, which we're about to record with me as a guest on yours. Right. So I'm super stoked. How did you get into the podcasting game to begin with? That's where I'd like to start.
Okay, so podcasting, I did a guest appearance as a host in 2008 on one of my original mentors in the fitness and wellness world named Sean Croxton. So he had this show called Underground Wellness. And I had my first taste of,
I used to listen to that.
Right. I think a lot of people did.
Yeah.
And the show's no longer out anymore. But anyways, 2008, I become good friends with him. And he's like, I think you should try this. He's like, I think you'd be good at it. I have a sense. And I interviewed Juan Carlos Santana from the Institute of Human Performance in 2008, 2009. And it was so fun. I was like, oh, we can actually just guide a conversation based on what I'm curious about? Cool, I'll do that. And then I put that dream away for a while. I left the fitness industry. I committed spiritual suicide behind a desk. Nothing wrong with sitting behind a desk if you love what you're doing. But there was a huge part of me that always kind of remembered what that felt like, the podcasting, having conversations that mattered. And I got to this point in working in corporate America where I actually got the gift of being fired, which a lot of people don't know that about me. So I was driving home after getting fired, and I was like, I felt so kind of scared, but also invigorated at the same time, because I knew, I was like, I'm going to chase down this dream. I had put Wellness Force in a box and left it there for like 3 years. So when the universe gave me the gift of being fired, that was when my soul kind of opened up. And that's when I really took podcasting seriously. And of course, in divine fashion, I had broken up with my ex-girlfriend. I was sleeping on my friend's couch. I was figuring out how to make money. I mean, my first 50 shows was like me recording out of a friend's spare guest bedroom on top of a rickety ass plastic little stand with my laptop, the old school laptop that weighs like 10 pounds, and an ATR 2100 mic. So that was like, I left out a lot there, but that was the beginning of the podcast world, man. It was getting the gift of being fired.
Give me one mind-blowing, soul-expanding moment on your podcast. Do you have one conversation or one moment that shifted your life in a meaningful way?
Yeah, actually, it came in that time. One of the guests I had on was Gay and Katie Hendricks, the Hendricks Institute. They talk about body intelligence. And
wait, what's his first name?
Gay Hendricks.
Oh, yeah. Dude, The Upper Limit.
Absolutely.
Is that the name of the book, or is that the concept?
I think it has the fish jumping out. People watching and listening, they're like, I know the name of it. I know what it is. But it's the upper limit problem. That's Gay. And he was
the book is called Leap of... The Big Leap.
The Big Leap.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Amazing book, The Big Leap. And then the upper limit is a phenomenon of your personality, which maybe you feel free to talk about.
Absolutely.
It sounds like that's what happened, but I love that.
This is the default mode network in the brain, man, this negativity bias. So anyways, in those first 50 episodes, I was like, this guy just starting out, no real big guest roster, got a connection from a friend, and here I am interviewing Gay Hendricks, who was in one of my favorite of all time documentaries, and this documentary about the hero's journey, and it's called I Am Joe. And so that's when I first learned about Gay's story. Anyways, he's on the show, and this is kind of like maybe 3 years into my personal development journey. I'd start going to men's work and doing David Dita exercises with my facilitation group, and started reading books. And it's kind of what got me into the podcast world, was just really discovering, like, what is my own physical and emotional intelligence, and how do I use that, man, to live my life well? And that's always been the genesis of why I do Wellness Force in the first place. And he's on the show and he said, Josh, whenever you're having anxiety, think about anxiety as just fear wearing a different pair of clothes. And think about how you can love your fear. And at the time I was like, the hell is he talking about? Love my fear. Like, what does that even mean to love your fear? And I understand it now because it's come through in a very powerful ayahuasca ceremony, and it's also come through in multiple conversations since then. So I think it's funny you asked me this question, which is such a cool question. What's the biggest mind-blowing moment on the podcast? It came pretty early, and it came from Gay Hendricks telling me about loving my fear, this concept of loving my fear.
That's very cool. Thank you for reminding me of that author too. And he's one of my target guests, but then I have all these kind of big authors and big name guests and stuff, but then I just meet people along the journey, and then my list, the people that are on I got to get Gay Hendricks on the show. This is like 2 years ago when I read that book. I was like, oh my God, I got to talk to this person. I think he's based in Ojai too.
He's in Ojai.
Yeah, which is where my Byron Katie also lives there, and so does my girlfriend. So I'm there a lot.
Like a spiritual vortex, man.
It is. But I wanted to get him on, and then I kind of forgot about it. So thank you for reminding me. I like the concept in The Big Leap of the upper limit, where, and I want to hear your take on this too, but that was such a huge breakthrough for me. I remember where I was exactly when I was listening to that audiobook. I was driving to Tahoe to go to the Amp Coil Summit, and my business partner, Lauren, had turned me on to the book. And this upper limit thing is that you have this thing inside of you that when you start to get too successful or happy, it does something to make your life shitty, or you just start thinking your life shitty because you can't stand to actually be successful.
Yeah.
And, I'm paraphrasing grossly here, but the way that book describes that is that we all have these kind of ceilings on just how good we can feel about ourselves and about our life. Like you were talking earlier about, realizing that you don't have to struggle. And I'm someone that's struggled a lot and still do even sometimes, this week has been like a struggle for no specific reason other than just being overwhelmed with too much shit going on.
Yeah.
But it's also the upper limit of just like, oh, I can't be super happy all the time. That wouldn't be fair to the people who are unhappy. Or, I can't make a bunch of money because if you're spiritual, you shouldn't care about money. Just all these weird, preconceived ideas and notions. Crazy. And also just this limitation of, I better not get too happy or someone's going to knock me down, or I don't want to get too happy because X, Y, and Z could happen, and I always have to be prepared for Armageddon. You know what I mean? This kind of thing. So it's a hugely impactful teaching and book. But give me more on that. What does that look like for you and your insights into self-limiting beliefs and whatnot while we're there?
Yeah, the undercurrent of every thought, feeling, and action is the bedrock of belief, man. The beliefs that I have, which is actually a mirror of the imprinting that happened when I was a child from age 0 to 7. That's when everything formulated. So this upper limit issue that Gay talks about, it exists in all adults, whether they're conscious of it or not. And I know for a fact that I've had pivotal moments in my life where at that moment of the upper limit coming up, and it would say something like this: who are you to talk about this? Who are you to have this much money? Who are you to have a loving relationship? I mean, that's there. Now, just because that's there doesn't mean that it's true. It's just something that came up based on the old imprinting that happened 0 through 7. So I think the upper limit problem isn't really a problem. I think these problems come into my consciousness to test my resolve about how grounded and spiritually connected I really am to myself, to higher power. So I don't know if it's a problem, this wording around that. And it's funny, we're in your backyard.
Talk about that,
next
about
to
the
biohacking
language
area. And this power of words, in the same regard where you asked me about the upper limit problem, I immediately was like, wait a minute, is it really a problem? This understanding of my friends Mike Bledsoe and Mark England, they have this company called Enlifted, and they talk about cognitive fitness. And my friend Mary Shores has a whole book on conscious communications. So at the bottom of it all, the words that we're using, if I say to you, hey, Luke, I'm going to try to be at your house at 2:30. Well, what does that actually mean? Like my subconscious mind is hearing that, and it's like, well, we told him we'd try, so we actually don't have to be there at 2:30. Rather than me saying, you know what, I'll be at your house at 2:30. I mean, that's a very direct, promise-based, empowering type language. And so the words that we use, I've been on a pretty big tear for the past 2 years of really understanding the power of words. And I think in the same correlation with the upper limit problem, we can use conscious language to attack the upper limit so that it's not a problem. And by attacking it, what I mean is we're just taking it in and see if it's real. Because most of the time, the voice that comes up, it's just part of the shadow, man. It's just part of our shadow, the one that says we're not good enough, or who am I to have a nice home, who am I to have a loving relationship. All that stuff is based on a very old program, because we're fucking software. Okay, we have crazy software. We are like half beast, half spirit. So we're in this physical meat suit. We have programs that download to us. I'm sure you've been driving one day and you just got an idea like, whoa, you just had a download or something that came through that was amazing. Where did that actually come from? Like, where do our ideas come from, and how do we articulate those ideas with conscious language so that they actually turn into fruit, so they actually bear fruit? This is my fascination right now, currently in my exploration. And I think it begs the question, these upper limits, are they there to teach us, or are they there to push us down? So I really believe it's which one we choose. Like upper limit, and Gay talks about it in the book, the way that we beat the upper limit is that we actually lean into it. Instead of like acknowledging it, and we'll first acknowledge it, but then instead of just acknowledging it and allowing it to make us feel small or direct our decisions, it's actually acknowledging it, leaning into it, and learning, like he said, to love it. How do we love the upper limit that comes up for us all? This is a big discussion.
No, it's a great discussion. As you're saying that, I almost caught myself about to say, speaking of language, and this gets nuanced, and obviously you don't want to be over analytical and over critical.
And you don't want to check your friends all the time. Be like, you said try.
Yeah.
You're going to be like fucking annoying.
I'm that guy though. When someone says, I'll be, hey, can you do X, Y, and Z? And the person's like, well, I'll try. Then I'll usually say like, you know what? Don't try. Just, I'm not going to count on you. And if you come through, great. And if not, I'll have no expectations.
Yes.
And then they're kind of, but what I was just about to catch myself was about to say was, you know what? I should really listen to that book again, The Big Leap. I'm shooting on myself.
Yeah.
Is that one of the words that you...
It's so big. And actually, I posted something about this. Totally. I posted something about this on Instagram. The word should is probably the most disempowering word in our language because it's used so haphazardly among friends and family and even in business. I work with people and somebody will say, well, it should be done by 4. That should be taken care of. And so when it comes to business, I'll just check and direct and be like, well, is it actually going to be there at 4 or not? And just be directive. I'm not trying to be aggressive or mean. I'm just trying to be truthful. And I think the truth is blocked by these soft words like the should. And also, too, in the movie with Gay Hendricks, there was a scene where, and Elliot Hollis has talked about this too, the thou shalt monster. The monster from archetypes in history and story, where the monster would come in and it's like, thou shalt do this. Thou shalt love thy God. Thou shalt love thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy blah, blah, blah. There's all these shoulds and shoulds not that are built in and baked into old school tapestry of religion and dogmatic beliefs that we're still living out today. So the fact that you and I are talking about it is pretty amazing.
That's cool. I find myself, I think it's just the rebel in me that has never really given up the fight against the man. But I still find some cultural norms frustrating. And so I go out of my way to break them while trying to be conscious about it and not make people terribly uncomfortable just for the sake of torturing people who are still really caught in the matrix. But for example, one thing that I really enjoy in my life is being exposed to the sunlight. I just, we go out in the backyard. I just love being in the sun. The sun is my favorite thing probably about the physical world. And maybe, sun and water. Yeah. Well, and trees. I got a top 3. They can't compete.
Basically, you have a love affair with nature.
Yes. But when I go outside, it's imperative that I get as much of my skin in the sunlight as possible. So I always like to take my shirt off. Yeah. And I used to be really insecure about taking my shirt off because if I was in kind of a public place where it wasn't normal, say like not at the beach. and I would be insecure because I felt like a weirdo because no one else has their shirt off. So therefore I want to fit in and I don't want to be that. Then there's the other side of it that's like, I'm not exactly ripped and I'm not the guy who's taking his shirt off because he thinks he looks super dope. I'm like, got, half of man tits and, but my body's seen better days. I go in and out of shape. I'm never quite in the shape that I would like to be where I'm like, God damn, I have my shirt off and I'm proud of it. I literally just want the sun. And so take a situation like that where we're taught you should not take your shirt off as you're walking the dog down a suburban street or something.
Yeah.
Why should I not? Well, no one else is. It's not appropriate. And then my question from my higher self, truly, and kind of my inner child is like, well, who says why not? Who's it going to hurt? I mean, I'm not walking around with my pants off.
Right.
Which is a cultural norm. Also, you should not expose your genitalia. Mm-hmm. But, that's because that's illegal. Also,
unless you go to Burning Man. Then that's a totally different story.
My girlfriend told me something about Burning Man. I think it's called like shirt cocking or something, where dudes like walk around in a shirt with no underwear. I don't know. I'm like, please. Wow. I'm going to encourage
her. It's like SpongeBob SquarePants.
I'm encouraging her to never again go to Burning Man after I got that information. But, I like observing things from that point of view and just looking at cultural norms and our conditioning. I think what it is, I resent conditioning that doesn't make sense. If it's illogical, I don't want to follow it. I need to know why. And I think as a podcaster and someone who interviews a lot of people like I'm interviewing you, I want to know the why of things and the how of things, how it works, why it works, what's the purpose, what's the point. And if there is a tradition or a rule or a principle or a law or axiom, I'm cool following it as long as I know why.
Yeah.
So if you tell me, Luke, you shouldn't take your shirt off when you're standing on the corner waiting for someone in downtown LA, okay, that's interesting. But why? What harm is it going to do? And if someone comes up with a logical explanation, well, perhaps, the little lady that walks by feels threatened or uncomfortable or whatever. If it makes sense to me logically, then cool. I'm game for conforming to that norm.
I love that you have this part of you that is attached to the rebel aspect, because I think that's really healthy. And no matter who you follow or who you read from, I would say 90% of the books in your house, like the Jen Sincero book I was flipping through before we sat down, she has a rebel heart. I think most people that have created any kind of following or influence that's allowing men and women to be more conscious, they are a rebel deep down inside. Because let's face it, Luke, like we've been suppressed for quite a long time. And you and I are fortunate enough to live in this powerful time of social media. And look what we're doing with the podcast, where we're reaching people with like this new understanding of what's possible and what's out there. So my sense is that the rebel aspect is actually what the ivory towers and the system is designed for, to kill inside of people. When we kill, and Alan Watts calls it our inner rascality. So when we allow our inner rascality to die, then the things in life that typically had more joy and more fun, they become more mundane.
Oh God, that sounds so boring just to not have rascal.
Let's be rascals.
My girlfriend calls it coyote energy, in terms of like the animal totem kind of system, I think is where she's getting that. But sometimes I'll be precocious and rowdy and she'll go, oh, you have that coyote energy,
This is
which I take as a compliment. And
yeah.
of course there's a time and place for it, but it's like, for example, say I'm waiting, I'm in an elevator or waiting in the dentist's office or waiting in line at the DMV in a situation in which everyone feels uncomfortable and awkward.
Yeah.
I literally can't just be part of that energy. So I'll just start talking to me. What's up, dog? How you doing? Like, I'll just start doing shit to break up the monotony and the confines of awkwardity because people are stuck together in a different situation.
Well, I have a different level.
Forced extroversion to just be friendly and kind to people and be outgoing. Even though I don't really want to be, I also want to just stare at my phone and avoid everyone, like everyone in the elevator or small room is doing. But it's an opportunity to grow out of that conditioning that says it's weird. You're a weirdo if you just start talking to someone. Say, hey, how's your day going, man?
Yeah.
With no agenda other than just sharing some sort of connection with someone.
Well, you have a higher level of emotional intelligence, right? You're like your EQ, your
I also have the
intelligence.
highest humility probably of all citizens of the state of California. I might be the most humble man in the world.
Beautiful.
No, I'm just kidding.
I think we can all feel that now.
There's this old personal development tape that I used to listen to, and the guy came out. That's why I always make that joke. And some people think I'm serious, and then I'm like, no. The guy comes out and he's like, well, I was going to do my talk on humility tonight, but quite frankly, the room's not full enough. I always love that when someone's like, what do you mean? I'm the most humble person here. It's just, I don't know. Humility is one of the funny principles to talk about, because the minute you claim it, you don't have it. It's like a thing that can only be said about other. If you say you're humble, then you're not, because you're making a value judgment of yourself, I think. Anyway.
Well, I think humility is one of these traits that it has a time and a place. Yet doing things all the time from a place of ultimate humility, I think can actually water down that rascality that we talked about. So if we're always operating from a place of humility, and it's funny, most people don't know this. I taught youth martial arts for a year. And there was a huge part of me that learned about humility from martial arts and all these different things. But I found that when people constantly come from a place of, you need to be humble, and look at even that word stemming back to our language conversation. When you need to be something, if you're not, then you're not living right. So when I say the word need, like, oh, you need to be more humble. It's like, hold on, there's a lot to unpack there. Like, what's the context of what's going on here? Is it something where somebody is operating from their head and no connection to their heart? Well, in that case, maybe they can look at the ways that they can explore being more humble. But you see how it's a totally different conversation than, hey, man, you need to be more humble. I mean, that's a shaming kind of energy. You know?
And even doing it on yourself, right?
100%.
If I see,
that
man,
voice operates in my head the most.
I always find myself saying, man, I need to work out more. Well, do I really?
Yeah.
According to whom? Right?
Yeah.
According to a prefixed idea I have that says, well, I talk about health a lot, so I should be doing a high-intensity workout at least 3 times a week. Then I could say I don't need to. Like, where do these numbers, where does the metric come from, right?
I think there's been like 3 different intersections so far in our discussion, like whether it's the default mode network or negative loops, negative feedback loops, however you want to describe it. Like Nir Eyal talks about it a certain way. Dan Party talks about it a certain way. Gretchen Rubin has her tendency types. However we want to slice it, we all have this negative voice that pops up in our minds. And it's a collective unconscious that I think they come from. This collective unconscious, Carl Jung talks about a lot, where in the collective unconscious is literally a stored memory of all the men and women that have ever lived and that live right now and that are going to come to be. So I think that's where these things pop up from, this collective unconscious.
That's trippy.
And I think to the degree we're conscious, if Luke and Josh in this moment are conscious and we're like, okay, we're here, we're having a fun discussion, and we're really focusing on what it is we want to create, well, then I think we bypass that collective unconscious where all those upper limit beliefs and kind of negative gargoyles can pull us down.
Those fucking gargoyles.
Fucking gargoyles, man.
That's sort of that concept of the collective unconscious is similar, if not parallel, to the Akashic record. You know, it's like everything that's ever been said or thought or done is held in time and is held in some sort of ethereal record.
It feels real to me.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because you were talking earlier about how an inspiration will just come to you out of the blue. You're driving down the street, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, ding, I got a title for a book or a theme for a painting or a film or whatever it is. Those thoughts are coming from somewhere, whether they're on the positive, creative, inspirational side or whether the thought is like, yeah, why should I even try to be successful? Everyone knows I'm a dumbass and a loser, you know, which is thoughts that I've had a lot in my life, less so these days, but they still come up. Yeah. But there is some sort of field where this stuff exists, and then it's as if our consciousness or our brain even is a receptor and an antenna that pulls in these things that already exist. That's why I think it's funny when somebody takes a compliment to the head, like if you're an amazing guitar player, I'm like, Josh, you know, you're such a great songwriter, guitar player. If you let that go to your head, it's actually really silly because you didn't give yourself that ability. You know, it's like even Keith Richards. You
cultivated it with inside yourself.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah, you had some insight to say, oh, there's this thing I might be able to kind of, you know, bring out and work with and cultivate.
Yeah.
It's like Keith Richards, who's my all-time, everyone is, I'm sure, sick of hearing me say this on my own podcast, but he's my all-time favorite musician ever, right? I just love that guy, always have. his most famous guitar riff, and maybe one of the most famous riffs in the world, is Satisfaction. Bow, bow, bow,
Love
now,
that
now.
song.
He thought of that it came to him when he was in his sleep. He dreamt it, woke up and had a little recorder and just recorded and went back to sleep. And then that became, one of the most iconic rock songs of all time. So that's only 3 notes. Bow, 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 bow. It's like it's 3 stupid little notes, but it's like the theme of a whole generation of people, right? Culturally. And so where were those 3 notes living in the sort of conscious sphere in that particular order, right? And that particular rhythm that happened to like boop pop into his brain. And furthermore, why doesn't that happen to him anymore? I mean, it's been a long time since Homeboy's written something that good.
This is so interesting, man. There's a book that talks about this. It's called Hit Makers.
Oh, really?
And they explore like why things become hits and why things don't. And they talked about this in the music industry. And I forget the name of the author, but the book is fascinating. I actually got turned on to it by Adam from Mind Pump. He's like, you got to read this book, man. And I think one of the things they found was that there's a certain rhythmic and hypnotic frequency. I'm sure you've talked about the Schumann resonance on your show and being grounded. There's something about frequency that kind of pulls us in. So I think that bam, 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 it probably has some kind of resonance that's connected to the Akashic records, that's deep in the collective unconscious, that we here now as conscious souls connect deeply to. I bet you that's really what's going on compared to, there's no reason why things become hits. I don't know. I have a sense that like why anyone becomes a hit is because they're just being their damn selves. Like Keith Richards, you and I, anyone that's creating something, if they're connected to the deep resonance of who they are, well, then they're going to be connected to the resonance of that collective unconscious or the Akashic records, whatever it is. But when we're living outside of that, when we're not aligned with whatever resonance actually is the one that drives us, that we feel most connected to, I think that's when disease and that's when hits don't happen at all. And I felt that a lot of times in life, man. And sometimes the universe, this is from Gay Hendricks, the universe will tickle you with a feather for you to change, or it'll bust you over the head with a sledgehammer. And I had a sledgehammer moment where I was in the fitness industry and I couldn't count reps anymore. It's funny, your brother was over here today and we were talking about fitness. And I was like, I refuse to count reps anymore for a rich lady in La Jolla to come to me after her nail appointment. I just don't want to do this anymore. And I had such a deep calling to fitness. I was like, well, what am I going to do? That was my identity for so long. And so I just went through this phase, as David Data describes, which is the space between purposes. Because sometimes in life, our purpose is to figure out our purpose. And that was a sledgehammer moment for me when I left fitness behind. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen right now. And I just explored. I moved to Mammoth Lakes.
Oh, you did?
I spent time in nature.
That's cool. Yeah. I've not spent a lot of time in Mammoth.
It's beautiful up there, man.
I like it. I've driven through and dipped in the hot springs a couple times.
You
and
would
I'm
love
like,
Mammoth Lakes.
This place is dope. I got to remember to start hanging out there. Thanks for the reminder.
You're welcome. And everybody, go to Mammoth Lakes because it's gorgeous. But the sledgehammer came where I fell into a deep depression that year, like probably the deepest depression I've ever had. And I went back to drinking. I was doing all these old habits again. And it was because I wasn't comfortable sitting with the not knowing. And I would drink and I would smoke a bunch of weed and I would party and I would use sex as ways to like get me out of the feeling I had in my chest.
I've never done anything like that.
No one has.
Who would do that?
Yeah.
Really, Josh?
It's almost like we're all universally connected in our lessons or something. So that was 2011, man. And I went through this darkness. I mean, the ultimate, like, dark night of the soul. That was a dark night of the soul for me. 2011 was a dark night of the soul. And it led to me really facing my demons through different kinds of work like MITT, and actually in 2014 leading to my first ayahuasca ceremony and having a conscious relationship where this woman showed me so many things about how I was actually showing up and I wasn't seeing it, because women can be a man's most powerful teacher. This is why I love women so much, because they're a mirror for us, right? You know this because you're in relationship. So I think, like, stemming back to our original inflection in the conversation, why do certain things happen and why do they not, whether it's hits or successful relationships or anything else? I get this sense that we're actually living life backwards. And I told this to a woman that I'm hanging out with recently, because sometimes when I'm talking to her, I'm like, I feel I feel like my future self, my highest potential self is actually talking to me right now and saying, oh, you're doing a great job and you're in the perfect place. So I think we're all pulling from this collective unconscious. And I think to the degree that we're doing our work to be conscious, which is a whole podcast of its own, right? Like consciousness podcast. This is why I'm so fascinated with how do I live my life well? This is what we're doing on Wellness Force, is figuring out what kind of emotional and physical intelligence do we get to have to embody that allows us to live life well and truly like be that intelligence instead of faking it till we make it, or, you know, having everything on the outside look one way, but how we feel on the inside is totally different. That's ultimately, I think, my work until I leave the planet, is to get to all those answers. And there's a lot to work with, man. There's a lot of juice in there.
When it comes to these thoughts that sometimes limit us, those thoughts that beat us up, that negative self-talk, which is, oh, I have a great idea. And then a voice comes in and is like, you can't do that, idiot. People are going to hate thinking? That. You definitely don't deserve that level of success. Where do you think yours originate from? You know, what kind of shit happened to you when you were a kid? Not to, you know, bring up the past or get into like a victim mentality, but
sure.
Were there instances where you bullied, or I'm always curious kind of the root cause of things. I know what mine are, of course. I've talked about them, you know, ad nauseum on interviews and things like that, because I don't want to get stuck there personally, right. But I like to see, and even, you know, speaking of ayahuasca, I've had experiences where I could see not only like, oh, where did this trigger come from, or this emotional trauma or wound, but actually see the depth of it and see how much it affected me. It's not even that I didn't know the thing. I just didn't know, holy shit, that wrecked me. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know, getting picked last for the sports team, whatever the shit was, you know, getting made fun of, any of that.
Yeah.
So what were your early traumas or experiences that put the voices in your head that say you suck?
The power of this is that right now you and I in this moment are a fucking living library. We have book after book of things that have happened for us or to us, however you want to read the book. But we have a freaking plethora. Like, I'm towing probably 1 million books behind me of things that have happened. And so I think at the base of your question is like, what were the imprintings that happened when I was very young that led me to have certain tendencies of how I act from a place of love or fear as an adult?
There you go.
That's really it.
Wow, you restated my question beautifully. I like how you said it.
It's almost like we're podcasters or something. So I think
that's great.
I think at the bottom of it, this stems from a deep mother wound and a deep father wound, both. And I like exploring this because it's a check-in to see if it still has a charge for me. Mm-hmm. So it's not just because we have conversations or share to understand one another doesn't mean that we are focusing on the negative or focusing on what we don't want, because we all know about the law of attraction. But when I look at my relationship with my mother, there were times where I have so many memories of being a kid, hearing her in the back room screaming to Jesus about like just being in pain. And that was a very heavy imprint for me. Also memories of her being carried out of the house on a stretcher when I was very young, not knowing what was going on, being lied to about my grandparents that, oh, it's fine. Because my grandparents, one thing that, since we're in mental health awareness month right now, the big thing with mental health awareness is a lot of people are so afraid of it and they don't know how to deal with it. They don't have the patience or the presence to deal with mental sickness, that they'll just kind of deny it. And so my grandparents were from the old adage, World War II, where they didn't know how to actually approach it. They were just like, I don't know what to do. So I was a young kid and they would say, oh, your mom just needs sleep. She just needs a break. Everything's fine. And that was probably the most, on top of that, my mom's sickness, the most deleterious thing that happened for me, is because it taught me when I was very young that when people act sad or when people are going through things, that everything's fine, that we don't actually have to really explore that. And that was a deep one for me, where it took quite some time. And even still now, right? I'm still connected to that younger version of me. There's just a different way that I hold him now. And so he knows that I got him. Like, we're in this together. You know, the young version of Josh and the man Josh, we're doing a great job now. But there was a time where I was so angry at what the young Josh wanted that I didn't have the intelligence to actually be present and ask him, like, what does he need? You know, and what he needed was, he needed to be seen, he needed to be acknowledged, and he needed to be heard about what happened when I was young. And so there's certain tools that I've used to get to that understanding, yet the work still continues because one of my things, it's funny, I was interviewed by Paul Chek on his podcast on my birthday, which was so cool. And he goes, well, what do you want most in life right now? And I'm like, I want conscious partnership. I want conscious relationship. And he's like, great, we're going to do a prayer. So we did a prayer on his podcast. And the prayer was so powerful, man. And I'll keep it sacred. I'll let people listen to the show. But when the mics turned off, he basically said, this is going to be one of the most powerful things for you, but it's also going to be one of the most growth promoting things for you, conscious relationship. So the more I learn about myself, the more conversations I have, and even being in relationship with a woman, that's what brings me down to those imprintings to see if they still hold the charge. And then I can show up when you ask me, hey man, what were the things that happened when you were young? I can be honest about them, but they don't dictate and direct how I show up from love or fear now. And I think that's the biggest work that all of us get to do. And I'm not perfect. Like, I don't have this shit wired, but I do have a deeper understanding and awareness of it. And so I have a better way to practice than I've ever had.
That's dope. Well said.
Yeah, thanks, man.
What role has plant medicines taken in your own emotional healing? And you know, as you said, the charge that these different memories and experiences have.
Yeah.
Have plant medicines help to reduce or eliminate the charge there and actually healed those things? Or what insights have you had in that way?
Ooh, we want to go to the jungle? And I'll say this with a caveat, a grain of salt. Like, that line of work is not for everyone. Like, doing plant medicine is not for everyone. It's for a true warrior heart. It's for someone that wants to go through the eye of a storm, and to save a lot of time. So for me, my very first journey was actually so scary and so challenging that I told myself I would never do plant medicine again. It was 2014. I was in a relationship. It was on its kind of last leg. We've all been there where we feel that shit's about to break. And I was like, okay, I want to go within. And so we went to a ceremony together. It turns out the shaman, it was in a home in Ojai actually. And the shaman had some dark energy. I didn't know how important setting was at that time.
Oh, man. Can't be overstated.
Cannot be overstated. Yeah. So get to the bottom of the ceremony, sun's coming up, and I'm having my experience, and it was so negative and dark. But there was a moment where I went into the bathroom, and I purged. And as I was sitting there, I felt these vines kind of wrapping around my legs on the toilet. And I felt this motherly energy, like, we all know that feeling we get in our bodies when we see like our grandma or our mom and we hug them. It was like that, but times 20. It was this divine, powerful, feminine hold that just enveloped my whole body. And it was there fleeting. It was like, I don't know, 10 seconds or 15 seconds. But that feeling I had never felt before, like that intensity. And then it went away. And I think what ayahuasca wanted to show me was that I'm here when you feel called. I'm not here when you want to play. I'm not here when it's the wrong time, but I'm here when you feel called. And I waited 1.5 years to go back to ceremony. I didn't do ceremony again until like very late, mid 2016. And that progressed me to doing like a ceremony once a year, maybe twice a year. And in those ceremonies, this powerful woman named Brianna in Los Angeles, actually pretty close to here, she actually showed me in a loving space with the right intention, with the right kind of guidance, just how powerful that plant medicine work could be, where when I'm throwing up, when people purge, and by the way, we don't all have to purge. Like, we can yawn,
I yawned a lot.
Yeah, you could yawn 1,000 times.
I didn't purge, but I yawned so much, all 4 times.
It's so normal.
Yeah, I mean, kind of yawning that I've never done,
like
even
full
when
body yawn. Yeah, like, I feel like it's coming from your toenails.
It's not even a normal. Yeah, it's like a like really weird. That was one of the weirdest things that kept happening. And I thought, what the hell? I'm not tired. I'm wide awake. It's such a strange.
It's the same way that animals,
response.
Like when an animal gets in a fight in nature and they almost die, they'll run out to the stream and they'll shake.
Yeah.
So they'll get that charge out of their cells. We don't do that as human beings. So in medicine ceremonies, we get to discharge energy that could have been there for decades. I mean, who
or lifetimes
or past lives, if you want to go super woo.
Yeah.
Right. But the coming back to the question
Yeah.
is like that first real big moment I had was last year at Rhythmia, where there was a moment on a third night of ceremony where I was being held in my mother's arms, and I was the baby looking at my mother through my baby's eyes. And like that I still have the memory of that. Like it's still in there for me. And I realized, oh my God, I've been angry at God for her having sickness. I've been angry at the world. Who the fuck is the universe? What are we doing here? Like, and we've all felt like this, just the anger of like, what the fuck is there suffering? Like, why is all there this suffering? And then that all went away in a second. And I just realized how sad she was because she was fighting with my dad at that time. She didn't have the emotional presence to like really be there for me. And I saw a tear coming out of her eye. And I was just like, oh, this is all we get. Like this was like a reckoning moment for me where I saw and connected to her as a baby, which was a total trip, looking at her, connecting to her as a baby and holding her and feeling that she is doing the absolute best she can in that moment. And all of us are. And Brene Brown's done an amazing job about talking about this. You know, are we doing the best we can? But feeling it is so different of a mode of intelligence than hearing it or seeing it. Feeling it is an embodiment of intelligence. And in that moment, man, there was definitely like a receptor and a key that locked in for me, where I realized we are all here in moments of adversity to bleed gratitude. And I know that sounds a little intense, but what I mean by this is we go through moments of extreme adversity, whether it's physical, emotional, trauma, loss, and it reconnects us to each other. You know, when we have traumatic things that happen for us, we could look at them like, well, fuck you, God, fuck you, universe, and fuck you, issue. How dare you take away my sister? How dare you take away my mother, my brother? And those are all legitimate things that deserve processing and emotional ladder scaling. Yet, at the end of it all, it's because we love and care about the person. We care about being in a state of high vibration. That's why we're here, is to love. Like everything else just gets in the way. And so what plant medicine did for me is it literally lock and key receptor coded into my nervous system that my work in this world is to go through the adversity and bleed the gratitude for the person that I care about, for me, for Josh Trent. Like I love Josh Trent. So it's not in a facetious, cocky way. I just love Josh Trent. And that wasn't really true for me for a long time. A lot of like self-hatred and going through like body shaming issues, you know, being 280 pounds at one point. And that's what drove me to fitness. So with medicine ceremonies, we can all see how almost like in the Matrix, where there's the different hallways and things are coming in, where there's unlimited potentials and downloads of possible programs. With plant medicine, she will show you so many different possibilities, and she will wait until you and your soul pick the one that resonates most with you. But she's going to show you a lot of things that aren't true. And it's up to you, it's up to us in those moments to connect with the one that is true. And so in that moment, being a baby, being held by my mom, that was powerful. And now I have this loving relationship with my mom that I've never had, you know, because I'm actually able to see her. And the following year, I did some work on my dad. Yeah. I just kind of left that silent right there.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm reflecting back to my time and people that listen to my show. I mean, if you don't know, I did a recent trilogy about the 4 ceremonies that I did at Rhythmia. It's called Welcome to the Jungle. And I documented, you know, before I left, when I landed at the airport, I actually did reports like on the plane there the whole time. I kind of did little field reports, sort of gonzo journalism style, and then did one like long Facebook Live during the middle of the week.
I watched that one.
I ended up putting the audio on a podcast because I watched it back a little bit and I thought, wow, this is actually maybe more telling and in depth than some of the other interviews and things that I did, because it was there in real time and I had no intention of anyone ever seeing it other than the people that were watching it. But anyway, I said all that to say, you know, my experience is well documented in that for anyone that wants to go listen to it. I would also absolutely give the caveat and disclaimer that I'm not like, hey, everyone should go do plant medicine. It's like, at all.
Nope.
You got to have a strong stomach in more ways than one. But
Yeah.
I did want to share just a similarity. I had an interesting experience in mine where it was the fourth night and I had no perceivable psychoactive effects that night. It was a nada, really. So I thought, and I'm just laying there just hating it really the whole time, just like, wow, seriously. I don't mind feeling sick if I'm like high as shit on ayahuasca, like, and I'm having some insights and breakthroughs and I'm at least accessing consciousness from that point of view and going through those interdimensional journeys and all that. Like, I'm okay being sick, but that night I was just sick and just completely stone cold sober, right? So anyway, I also understood the principle of surrender and trust and how important that was. So I would talk to God, I would pray to the medicine. I go, hey, listen, I'm cool with this. It's uncomfortable, but whatever's supposed to happen, if I'm just supposed to lay here and learn how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, let's do it. All 7 hours, I'll just lay here and do my best not to go into negativity. Like, this fucking sucks. When is this over? Should I drink more? I already, the whole...
And that shit'll pop up in waves.
Yeah. But what did happen at the very end of the night, right when it was about to wrap up, is I had this quick little vision where I was in a hallway and I saw a door and I realized, oh, this is a hospital. Oh, this is a hospital in Denver. This is a hospital in Denver in 1970. That's me about to be born behind that door. Door swings open, little bloody embryo clay thing. Luke comes out, pops out of my mom. The nurses hand me to her. She holds me on her chest, and then the nurses whisk me away, take me away, and throw me in a room by myself in an incubator. And then I'm just abandoned and left in there. And in the particular vision, as I said, it was just like really quick, kind of like when you're daydreaming or something. It wasn't even a full ayahuasca, like where you're taking down the tunnel and the whole thing. I just thought, that was interesting. I don't know the circumstances of my birth, but I'd be curious to find out. So later, next day, I texted my mom and I told her the story. She said, yeah, that's exactly what happened, except you were wrapped in a blanket. Yeah. And then she said, yeah, and you were left alone for 3 or 4 days and no one could touch you. No humans could touch you. You were just locked in the incubator because there was a risk of infection or something.
Wow. Were you premature?
No, I was like 10 pounds when her water hadn't broken or, there was, I don't know, I'm not an expert on birth and the things that are supposed to happen, but there was some weirdness going on. So they put me in there. But the experience that I had was feeling that as a sense of abandonment and that I was just left alone. And I always think about things from sort of a Paleolithic point of view. What would nature do? How have we evolved? How are human apes born in the wild 15, 20,000 years ago? How it would have been handled? And I thought, wow, it's probably exceedingly rare that a newborn baby human ape would just be shoved off by themselves in fluorescent lighting and God knows what kind of environment without human connection and human touch. The baby, whether it survived or not, would have probably always been held by one or more members of the tribe, be it their parents or not, right? So it's kind of unnatural that a baby would be left alone in a really sterile kind of artificial environment. So, I don't know how much that colored my life, but I definitely felt it in my heart, like, ouch. It was an ouch feeling of like, God damn, that sucked. I was left all alone. And what was so trippy about it to me was just that I had no way of knowing that, and that the story was confirmed by my mom, who was the only real witness. Oh, and the other thing that wasn't in my story was that I got to see my dad on the way into the incubator. So they held me for a couple minutes. Mom held me for a couple minutes in the blanket. Then they kind of went and showed me to my dad, who had showed up a bit late but was there. And then they took me away, and that part wasn't in. But other than that, like, how do you see some shit that you don't even know happened and then have it be confirmed as fact by the third party? Really interesting.
This is really poignant for me because I was born premature, and when I came out of the womb, they put me in an incubator for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So that's why I asked you. And I've read research that when babies are born premature and they're placed in an incubator and they have lack of normal human touch, that can actually program their nervous system literally from conception, like all the way through, coming into the world, and the world is not a safe place and you're not going to be supported. So I don't identify with that belief, but I could understand how that might be part of my soul contract to unfold and live out here in this world, where there was something in my mom's nervous system where, and I think it was because at that time, just kind of based on what I can tell from history and whatnot, that she was fighting a lot with my father because he left 2 months after I was born. So I think my little baby soul knew that it wasn't safe in my mother's body anymore, because who knew about her microbiome and her nervous system? That's all getting transported into me. And if you look at the research, it's 100% true now. The stress hormones, the telomeres, everything that's going on gets transported. Mitochondria.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if a baby comes out C-section, she or he's not getting bathed by the natural probiotics that are fed when the baby's mouth is opening. So, long story short, I think that there's a big piece of coming into this world, choosing certain things. Earlier, I said I feel like I'm in touch with my fullest potential self, and I'm seeing life in reverse. Man, I can be 39 here sitting with you now and be like, yeah, I can see why I chose this kind of a life. I can see why these things have happened for me. And I can also, if I choose, see why they happened to me. I can fucking choose at any moment if something's happening to me or for me. And man, when I look at all the things that have happened for me, it's led me to sitting here with you in your house. Like, it's led me to having people that care enough to listen to the conversations that I have. And it is part of our collective healing, is to see things happening for us instead of to us, because to us is the victim spiral. And it's like a muse in the ocean, man. Do you know the story about Odysseus in the ocean? I think it's actually Ulysses in the ocean. Oh. So every time he and his sailors would go by the muse, the sirens actually that would sing to the sailors, he would say, there was one specific time, and it's a fable, and he said, tie me to the mast so I can resist the siren's call. Tie me to the mast. And because he knew that if he heard the siren's call, he would be drawn to them, and then they would basically kill him and eat them and all of his sailors. So he directed his sailors to cover their ears and tie him to the mast. And I feel like a big piece of why we're here is to resist the call of the sirens that are actually trying to pull us to that kind of dark underworld. There is a dark underworld here. I think the dark energy in the world is driven by kind of a Lucifer force or a dark force, however you want to describe it. It doesn't matter. And I think if we're going to operate from love, then the only way we can do that, man, is to see things happening for us and to resist the muse when she calls, right? But I can be called by the loving muse. I can be pulled in by the loving muse through a woman or through healthy relationships. Like, all these things are happening at all times. People talk about non-duality. I haven't explored that yet. I perceive life as constantly having a duality in every moment, having a light and the dark. So this is really what I'm most fascinated by too, is language and consciousness and this physical and emotional intelligence. I think that the way that these things weave over one another is a really high level conversation that kind of scares people. You know, they could listen to us talking and be like, damn, these guys are getting deep, or, you know, this is so heady, or however you want to describe it. Yet a part of them feels interested. There's just also that fear. So when there's an interest and a curiosity and a fear, you're probably on the right path.
Right.
You're probably going the right direction when both those things exist, you know?
I think that probably the most powerful principle or practice in our lives is the knowledge that how we frame an experience, as you said, you know, to us or for us, but that our experiences and the degree of joy or pain that we feel as a result of those experiences is 100% framed by how we look at it, right? And the name of the game to me seems to be fine-tuning and really building that muscle of being able to turn the perception of a situation around faster, right? Where maybe in the beginning of that practice, you can look back on the kid that bullied you in school and see, you know what? He just did that because he was probably bullied, so there's forgiveness there. Yeah. And then, you know what? That actually made me kind of toughen up. And then I started asserting myself, whatever. You know, you find the gift in it. Sometimes 20, 30 years later, and then you work on some stuff and you get better at it, and you're able to see last week when you got that parking ticket that it wasn't the end of the world because that might have averted an accident further on, or maybe there was an accident on the road you were going to be on, shit like that, where you're like, oh, now I see the lesson. And in the beginning, for me, it was much more retroactive. The lessons where I was like, oh, now that I have some distance, I can reframe that situation as being for me instead of happening to me.
Yeah.
But exceedingly more now, it's getting to be where even in the middle of a situation in which I feel uncomfortable, I know that there's a for me in there, even if it's like barely accessible. In fact, this morning, I had kind of a challenging conversation with someone, and it was pretty triggering to me. But in that, I knew, even though I felt really uncomfortable, that I wasn't being victimized, and I wasn't victimizing anyone else. It's just there was a different perception of reality going on between two people that were seeing the same situation from an opposite point of view, and those points of view did not converge, right? And so there needed to be a little bit of space there, and then once space was taken, a little bit of communication, and then within that communication, I think because of an open heart and because of compassion, each person was able to go, oh, well, this is the way I was perceiving that situation. And it was explained to me, and I went, oh, shit, I had no idea that the other's perception was that. And I was like, what the hell? Oh, my God. And then what I was seeing, and, I have two people that have the same goal, and that is, having a harmonious interaction with one another and being supportive of each other. And without both parties, I think, being willing to zoom out and not just automatically assume that it's happening to me, that's where life starts to get really interesting, because then you become the alchemist that can literally turn every micro to macro situation in which things don't go, quote, end quote, your way into always being your way. Just like I had, when we were about to start, there was a miscommunication about scheduling another recording today. And in my mind, I'm like, this sucks. I felt really guilty. The person didn't get my email, and they probably ruined their day. And I didn't totally spin out, but it was like, God, that sucks. I felt bad. And was disappointed that it happened that way for a moment. But then very soon after, I was able to see, oh man, but whatever day it does happen is going to be the perfect day. And there's a reason why it happened exactly the way it happened. And, someone didn't get the email, blah, blah, blah. Lines were crossed and shit got funky. And it's going to be amazing and perfect. And me not having to rush through our conversations here today that we're having is going to make this even better. And so therefore, that thing that I could have thought happened to me, oh man, my schedule always gets, why does this always happen to me, man? It's like, oh, this is great. It's just another opportunity to reframe something and find the awesomeness within it.
This is why I love podcasting, because we can remind people to take a deep breath. Essentially what you're talking about is, how can I pause for a moment, power of the pause, and how can I actually,
I like that power of the pause. Is that a thing?
I think it's Obama used to do.
Oh, he did?
Like power of the pause, right?
Oh, yeah, because that was part of his persuasion style.
Yeah, he would always pause.
That's funny. Hey, guys, on my Insta, by the way, editors, please take this part out. Folks, on my Insta, I'm going to restart, and then you're on Facebook, so you're good. Okay.
Well, we're just hanging out together.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to restart this guy.
All right.
There we go, because it's, it does the thing.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Cool.
But serious, podcast masters, please take this out.
Take that out. So this reminder to take a deep breath, the breath work for me has been just as powerful, if not more, than the plant medicine. And I know you had experience with Christian Minson at Rhythmia, where you did the transformational breath. But literally, like on my arm is se posso respirare, posso scegliere, which means if I can breathe, I can choose in Italian.
Yeah.
So there is something that's easier to be done once we do this. Then you can see how a missed appointment's okay. Then you can come from a place of love. Then you can make a decision that's in alignment with you and the person. It all comes after that. But if we choose to not do that, and really it's a imperfectly perfect practice of reminding ourselves to breathe. I mean, it's as simple as that. Then we can come from a better place if we remember. But if we forget, then the challenge is going to be coming into a situation with a nervous system that's in fight or flight, shifted over to sympathetic, not being in our bellies, no vagal tone. Then when just taking if you look at the physiology of the diaphragm presses on the vagal nerves, and those vagal nerves cue the sympathetic nervous system to turn off so that we can actually be relaxed, be in rest and digest. So that's the physiology that I learned through Soma breath in Thailand. I was in Thailand for 30 days last year.
What?
Yeah, I did this week-long certification. Learned.
Are you serious?
Went super deep into breath work and ended up having a 50-person event in Encinitas where we filled the room. We did ecstatic dance and breath work. It was incredible. And there was a woman that came up. It's my friend Jem. And she goes, I haven't danced like that and I haven't felt like that in my body since I was 18 years old. And it begs the question, how many people could feel more youthful and more energized if we can create a community, Luke, where we all just remember to remind ourselves to breathe? Like, how powerful would that be? And isn't that what our best friends actually do? Like, being at your house, I think the first thing I said, I was like, it feels really comforting in here. It feels really grounded, you know, and it reminded me to like, just relax.
I told 2 people that yesterday via text that were having a difficult time. I was like, first number, you know, like I always like bullet point things because everything has to be numbered or like bullet pointed. I don't like paragraphs. I like short ideas.
Me too.
So that's how I always communicate. But I was like, number 1, breathe. Remember to breathe. You know, and it's a reminder to other, but really a reminder to self.
It's so easy to forget.
That's interesting what you're saying about the. Give me more on the vagus nerve, not Las Vegas, but US.
It's the nerve endings, yeah. So they go down into the enteric. This is why I love talking with another health wellness podcaster, because I could talk about this stuff forever because it just excites me. Like, it's fun to explore. From what I've read, and I talked to Dr. Ruscio about this, the enteric nervous system has more nerve endings in it than any other piece of nerve ending in our body. There's more there than anywhere else in our entire system. More than the endocannabinoid system, more than the receptors for photoreceptors, more than the afferent, efferent nerve endings, like all of it. Because that term gut feeling, it's there for a reason. Like, my nervous system is feeling into anybody that I meet. And it's not really me. It's my enteric nervous system receiving signals from my eyes, which go to a holographic projection, then feeds to my brain, then goes down into my subconscious, then comes back up and then checks in with my enteric nervous system to make sure I can trust that person. So there's a lot going on, man. When we meet somebody, we're looking at their face to see if their facial tone can be trusted. We're experiencing somatically what's going on with us when we meet someone else. You can look into bioenergetics about this too. There's an entire field of study about bioenergetics, which is fascinating. Also, Bessel van der Kolk, he wrote The Body Keeps the Score. He goes into this very deeply in his book. But I think there's something to be said about the way that we can signal our nervous system through breathing. And also, let's not lie, if our enteric nervous system, if our gut feeling is giving us a signal about someone that's making us uncomfortable, like, it's there for a reason. You know, body intelligence, trusting your gut. The only caveat is if we have dysbiosis, the whole trusting your gut thing's kind of fucked. Because then we're trusting our gut from a place where there's dysbiosis and the bacteria is feeding us to be possibly in fight or flight when there's no reason to be in fight or flight. So there's this interesting lens that we look through, I think, when we meet people, where we're using the enteric nervous system, we're understanding who they are, and are we seeing it through a lens that's clouded because our gut microbiome is not populated effectively? There's that to think about too. So we're half beast, half spirit, man. We're just doing the best we can. So gut microbiome is actually what I'm healing now. I just had a call with Grace Liu when I was coming up here, the Gut Institute, and I'm about to do a full healing protocol.
Really?
Yeah, because I've been feeling in my body, I've been feeling very inflamed, very puffy, and just very tired from traveling for 13 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, I had a sinus infection this year that I used Dave Asprey's like protocol for with the xylitol and the water.
Yeah, I've done that one.
And it didn't work.
Oh, no,
I did
really?
it for 2 weeks, yeah.
I think sometimes if it goes too far, like if it's too far in.
If it's too far in there, there's nothing we can do.
You know what? So. On a side note, because I used to get sinus infections a lot. I get them much less so now.
Okay.
But on a side note, is doing ozone. But you have to have an ozone generator, and then you take a big syringe, kind of like turkey baster size syringe, and you don't inhale the ozone, obviously, but you just you shove it through. And Asprey has a video showing him doing it, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And I one of the biohacks I don't have yet is my own ozone generator. I'm kind of working on that, but that one I hear is like absolute silver bullet. So anyway, carry on. You had a sinus infection.
Yeah, I had a sinus infection, and I haven't taken antibiotics in 10 years.
Whoa, really?
But I took antibiotics recently. I was at PaleoFX and I took antibiotics.
Oh.
And it's so funny. We're talking about language and dark energies. I had so many negative voices coming up for me where I was like, should I tell anybody that I'm taking antibiotics? Like should I actually come out with that? I'm going to get all these people like, why didn't you try the traditional like naturopathic route? Or what were you doing? You should have been sucking herbs down your nose. And I just said, fuck that. I want to feel better. I just gave myself permission
I've done that
to
too.
just feel better. And so anyways, now that my gut flora is decimated, and now that I actually get to be in a place of true healing, I'm going to work with Grace Liu from the Gut Institute and really get down to the right kind of testing, the right kind of balance of gut flora, so that I can see people that I meet through that lens of love, and not be this amalgam of a shifting dial between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Like I care about myself and I care about people, so I just want to meet them where we actually are.
What else have you gained from breath work? What are some of the different techniques that you've tried? Why would someone want to work with breath? I actually did a session this morning. It's been a while. I kind of fell out of practice.
Yeah.
Now the sun's starting to hit my backyard a bit. So this morning I thought, well, I've got some sun. What am I going to do out here? And oh, ding, I opened my Wim Hof Inner Fire app and ran that for a minute.
Did you like that one?
I mean, I did it, I think, just because I've done 4 of his trainings and I think that I know it, but sometimes I'll go back and watch a video and he goes much slower than I do.
Okay.
Because I've been doing Kundalini yoga for a number of years, and in Kundalini yoga, there's all sorts of different breath work techniques, and oftentimes they're much faster, like a breath of fire through the mouth, like really long ones, and you'll go super fast and then hold it really tight for a long time, almost pass out.
Do you pull up the bandha as well?
Yeah, and you have like a whole DMT rush and all that. So I think I'm always going for the most extreme. So Wim Hof method is much more gentle and chill, and I think it's kind of like breath work for the masses. Not to discount it at all, it's effective, but there have been other techniques that I've used that have been a bit more transformative. So I'm just curious about some of the ones that you've tried out and what the differences are and what it does for you.
I've done the transformational breath. I've done Soma breath. I've done the Wim Hof. I've also done warrior breathing through Unbeatable Mind, Mark Divine Seal Fit, which is just quick inhales and exhales and then 5-count box breath. And I gravitate towards that one the most.
Really?
But there's a caveat for the daily practice only.
Okay.
For going deep, like I just did a very, very powerful ceremony, a breath ceremony with Anahata Ananda in Sedona. And we did not do box breathing, okay? We did rhythmic breathing. It was more in the Wim Hof style, but it's her own style. She has drumming and music. That's another thing too. There's certain categories of why somebody would want to do breath work. So the first category would be like, is this a daily practice for me to just cue my nervous system that I'm safe? Can I set myself up to win today? Then there's the people that are having a serious threshold moment. That's when a different style of breath work can be used. Like, oh my God, I'm about to give a presentation at work and I'm freaking the fuck out. What do I do in this moment? Mm-hmm. And then there's the third, which is more trauma healing. It's more deep dive into psychic surgery and letting things come up through the process of going deep with the hypoxia. So those are the 3 categories, I think.
What's hypoxia?
Hypoxia is where you take in a large amount of oxygen and then you have an oxygen surplus, and then you go from an oxygen surplus to an oxygen deficit. This is what causes clam hands and people
the T-Rex.
The T-Rex. So you go from a high state of oxygen to no oxygen.
I love that feeling.
Yeah, so the super oxygenation and then taking it away. And so for me, what I gravitate towards and what we put in the guide for the Wellness Force community, this M21 guide, I was like, okay, from all these podcasts, like what are the things that we actually should do? Because there's a lot that people say we should be doing, but what are the things that are going to be the most powerful? And breath work is in there. And so I guide people through 21 warrior breaths, which is just, but deep though, deep from the diaphragm out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And that cues, when you breathe in through the nose, it cues you to pull in through the sympathetic toning. And then when you breathing out long exhale is parasympathetic. So then for the box count, it's 5 in, 5 hold, 5 exhale, 5 hold. So it's 21 warrior breaths and then as many rounds of box breath as possible. And that's a starting point for people because it's easy to start. From there, we can do like 2-7-8 or 4-4-6, whatever it is. But it's really focusing on how do I get air in, how do I hold it, and then how do I let it go to where I'm training my nervous system that I'm safe as I'm letting it go. And I think that's the big starting point for most people is just having something easy that only takes about 5 minutes. Then stepping up gradually to the third phase, which was the trauma healing with a practitioner. I would not recommend people do like Wim Hof alone if they've never done it, like the full Wim Hof session, because it's very intense. And then, of course, in the middle, there's what kind of breath work do I get to do in a day where I'm feeling super triggered? Like I know I'm about to go talk to my wife and I know she's pissed off at me about something. What do I do in that case? I think doing a 2-7-8 would probably be powerful, like 2 seconds in, 7-second hold. And as we're holding, push the diaphragm around, like feel what it's like to have our diaphragm filled with air, and then let it go super slow for 8 seconds. So 2-7-8. That's a really good phase for immediate stress reduction.
That's cool. I've
Yeah.
never actually played with the numbers. Whenever I do box breath, I always do the same number all the way.
That's good
on
too.
all four sides.
There's
And
no
and
wrong
I'm
way to do
actually
it.
I've never thought of actually doing a more vigorous session and then ending with that. I think I always do like a box breath if I'm trying to calm down and I'm about to spaz out. And then the other ones I'll do when I feel kind of tired or jet lagged or something like that, where I do the more heavy kind of breath. It gets
Yeah.
me just feeling super alive, or before working out or jumping in an ice bath or something
I've
like
had
that.
full-on trips, like DMT style trips through breath work with more visuals and fractals than ever in a plant medicine ceremony.
Really?
Yeah, because going to a place where I can gradually teach my nervous system that it's okay to continue breathing in this fashion.
Right.
Going to a place where I'm in such deficit and saturation and then deficit, it does something to the cells. And I know there's a scientific explanation for it. I think it's more spiritual. Because if you really consider this, man, you know who told me this once on a show? I'm blanking on his name right now, but he said, there's something breathing you, right? Because you're not breathing yourself. There's something breathing you. And I thought, whoa, that's kind of true. I don't remind myself to breathe. Like breathing is our only autonomic response. It's the only thing that we have control over. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, we don't know how to digest our food. We don't know how to beat our own heart. So autonomically, it's the only lever we can pull to adjust our stress consciously is by breathing. And of course, by state changes, we can do that too. But breath gets us there really fast. It gets us to a state where we can love and connect, or it gets us to a state where we can heal and receive. And it's also a great starting point for people that don't want to do plant medicine. I think there's a really cool ramp up where someone does a Vipassana, then they do breathwork journeys, then they do float tank, then they do ayahuasca.
That's my deal. Yeah.
There's a ramp up there.
Yeah. And also,
nobody should just go into outer. You would never send an astronaut to space if they had never been there. You train these people in simulators,
Yeah.
So the same thing applies to medicine.
That's a really good point, because I think in my experiences with the more in-depth breathwork sessions, where you're doing this for 45 minutes, an hour, or whatever, I have tripped balls and started crying and had visions and memories and had these kind of spontaneous healing experiences that were very much like plant medicines. Because I remember being on ayahuasca going, oh, I've been here before, in a sense. And it was, well, maybe a combination of a lot of LSD use early in life. Unintentional.
I can't wait to interview you on the podcast, dude.
But I know what it's like to hallucinate and like have access to other dimensions, put it that way. But I was never doing it thoughtfully. It was like to see the dead and like just have fun, drink beer. I never had like hey, let's have a ceremony. The ceremony is like, let's fucking party. So the breath work though was like has been at various times a combination of that kind of psychedelic experience, but my intention of doing it is obviously not to have fun. My intention is like, man, there's probably some shit stuck in me psychically, physically, that I would really like to get out and heal so that I could become a more fully integrated person.
Yeah. And you know what too? We're all, I know we've all heard this before. We are all whole right now. It's just remembering that we're whole. And through letting go of the things, the shit, the stored imprintings, whatever you want to say, that's how we wake up to the fact that we're already whole. And I know you've interviewed Byron Katie, and like she has the 4 questions, the powerful question. The first one is really the only one we need, I feel like, most times. Like something goes down and is that true? Is it true that I'm an asshole? Well, let's see. Let's pause. Let's breathe. Is it true that I'm hurting someone? Is it true that I'm not enough? Is it true that I'm capable? I mean, all these things have different answers, but if there's no pause beforehand, if there's no stopping point where there can be a reflection, this is the most powerful thing that Byron Katie represents is like, can we just stop for a moment? Is that true? It might be. Okay, well, What's the next question? And going down this really easy 4-question path. So,
you know what's funny though with the Byron Katie thing is like it comes down to kind of the Course in Miracles thing. Would I rather be happy or would I rather be right? So in a conflict situation, the ego just it doesn't want peace. It just wants to be right. So the other person or situation or the other reality can be wrong. But to apply the Byron Katie questions and to kind of instantaneously do the work on yourself, you have to be willing to be wrong to yourself. You have to be willing to go, I'm full of shit right now.
I feel that.
And I find myself sometimes, and I've been into Byron Katie's work for 22 years. I mean, I went to see her when I was still like a drug addict. I went to a Byron Katie event. That's the first time my dad brought me. First time I ever saw her. And even though I was in a complete haze, I remember going, she found it. She's got it, enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. But you really have to be able to kind of pause the ego to even do that inquiry to say, oh man, I was tripping, because it's so easy to get attached to that positionality of I'm right, this situation's wrong. So I tell people it's kind of like the ayahuasca warning, like don't get into the work of Byron Katie unless you're if you're ready to be seriously honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because most of the shit that you're pissed off about is your own head.
This is beautifully stated. And what's crazy is that the ego is such a subtle little foe that it can place guards up, and it can be spiritually bypassing. It can be being a yoga teacher. It can be being a personal trainer. Dude, there was 10 years where I was shining light on other people so that I didn't have to feel the dark parts of me. 10 years. And I was holier than thou. Like, my body's my billboard. I'm going to be perfect. And I'm going to take care of people. And I was helping people. I'm not saying that I did anything wrong, because I know that I impacted people in a positive way. But when it came to the deeper work was so much more challenging than the physical work. The emotional intelligence that I think all of us are kind of collectively feeling right now, we're all craving to be more emotionally intelligent. It's surpassing the physical intelligence at sometimes. And we still need to take care of the physical intelligence, because that's our conduit. Like that's how we receive, like you said, being the antenna. If our antenna is dirty, like we can't operate properly. But the emotional quotient, the emotional intelligence right now at this time in history has never been so important, and also so abused and so bastardized. So that's why having a show like this and just having a conversation like this is such a breath of fresh air, because we're just communicating, and we're doing it from a place of just wanting to get to the truth as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I like what you said about the fact that we are already whole, and that everything's fine. In other words, like the spiritual game is not about adding something to ourselves. It's about removing things. It's a game of subtraction, not addition.
Yeah.
I just need to be more this. No, I don't need to be more anything. I need to be less this, less that, less this, less that, right? And that's not good news for the ego that likes to, in the mind that wants to complicate things and make things complex. Because then it can use that as an excuse to not do the work, when the work is really just like discarding bullshit that's not true, just getting to the truth. Anything that's an untruth, I have to find the root of it, get it out of my life, and then what's revealed there is the real you. Yeah, it's a really great perspective.
There's a lot of layers though, Luke. So what you're saying is true, and on top of that, I think the most challenging part for people is they might conceptualize one thing. So like, oh yeah, my ego understands that I get to do my inner work, and my ego understands that that's not true. But like you said, like the most bitter pill is the one where we actually embody and understand and accept that we were wrong. And it's the embodiment of vulnerability and saying like, you know what, I totally fucked up and I'm so sorry. Like that's powerful, but it's so hard to punch through sometimes and apologize. Fuck. I mean, that's the hardest thing sometimes,
It's especially hard when you know you weren't wrong. When you knew it was the other bastard, and still you're like, I'm sorry for my part.
Yeah.
And not demanding that they acknowledge their part, even though it was 99.9% their fucking fault.
Mm-hmm.
Before we wrap this up, I want to touch on a couple things, and that is, so we've talked a lot about kind of the metaphysical, the spiritual, the emotional.
I loved what we talked about.
Me too. I mean,
good.
this is where the rubber meets the road. Mm. However, I'm curious just kind of where you are with physical fitness piece, since that's such a huge part of your background. And we
Yeah.
were touching on that one. My brother Cody, who's a big fitness guy, was here earlier, as you said. And, like where do you see kind of the fitness industry? How has it evolved since you were in the, I'm assuming, kind of like get ripped, lose weight,
Yeah.
gym world, being a personal trainer?
Yeah.
What do you see going on in terms of the evolution of how we take care of our bodies? Because I think sometimes on my show, I'm all about biohacking and taking supplements and the spiritual and metaphysical. And I don't really often talk about like how you actually stay strong and stay fit physically, just because it's not been historically one of my top priorities, although I'm working on it now. So like, what are you doing to work out? Like, where do you see we're going in that world, and where have we been, and how's that evolving?
Well, if you look back to the late 1800s, there were strongmen, and there were all these different ways that people thought that health was going to actually be achieved by doing some pretty radical things. So I think the whole, really what we're looking at is we're looking at a disease of affluence when we look at obesity or people that are carrying too much weight. If you even think about this term, and this stems to your question, I promise I'll tie it in. What is fat? Fat is the body not feeling safe enough from an energetic perspective to continue on if it wasn't there. So if I'm going to let go of weight, then my body has to feel safe enough to let it go. Like my nervous system has to be 100% convinced that if I let this extra energy go, that I won't die. So I think looking at the way that people used to live, tons of physical activity, being in the sun, being in nature, like closer to the primal lens, it really wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that the fitness concept or the fitness industry even came about, because nobody cared about being obese in the past. And actually, if you were fat in the past, it means that you were rich. It was something that was sought after to be chubby. There were pictures in the 1700s of women being chubby, and it's like, oh, this is a beautiful woman. And the less tan you were meant the more rich you were, because if you were tan, you were working outdoors.
Right.
So we've totally flipped this script, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's the genesis of it. And then, of course, throughout like Jack LaLanne in the 60s and creating like the first gyms. Then from there, the 24-hour fitnesses and these big box gyms. I worked at a big box gym. And so I worked at a 24-hour fitness. And I think they help a lot of people. I also think they plant a lot of dark seeds in people, because they teach people, and the fitness industry essentially is designed to keep people coming to the gym and using cardio equipment and paying super high premiums for personal training. So it doesn't have, most gyms don't have an onboarding or an on-ramp system besides just meeting with a trainer for 15 minutes so they can sell you like an expensive package. And I know this because I was one of the trainers that used to sell these packages. Now, I believed in what I did. At the same time, though, I knew that my job wasn't to make them depend on me. It was to train them for a short amount of time so that they can actually do it themselves. And the fitness industry is set up in reverse of that. The moral compass of the fitness industry for the big box gyms is set up for breakage. And breakage means people are on EFT. They get paid every month out of their account to the gym, and the gym is banking, depending on these people not going to the gym. That's the only way these premiums can be so low.
I signed up for LA Fitness a few years ago when I was living on a different area of the Hollywood Hills, and I had my membership for 2 years.
How many times did you go?
0 times.
Yeah, exactly. So you're part of how they can keep the premiums low.
I went there twice.
Uh-huh.
I went there twice in 2 years. One day to sign up and one day to cancel, because they wouldn't let me cancel over the phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is stemming from the history and then coming to the now. This is the broken paradigm in fitness, where people are encouraged to go to the gym and do cardio. Because another part of my life, people don't know this too much, I hosted a fitness technology podcast that was like 60 episodes. And I quit because it just disgusted me so much that all these people ever wanted to do was just sell fitness equipment, sell treadmills, sell ellipticals, sell Stairmasters. And I saw this really dark part of the fitness industry where the majority of the fitness industry is based around people that are distributors selling equipment into fitness spaces, having more fitness spaces being built, and having people not go to the gym memberships they're paying for. That is the ultimate truth. Now, people could argue with me, but if you look at the data and the numbers, That's what's really going on. Now, there are angels, there are conscious people, there are trainers that really care and gyms that really care, but they're few and far between. And I think the healing that's happening in the fitness industry is that trainers are empowering their clients to have knowledge and to not work with them forever. But that's a paradigm that's based on scarcity and are you going to be my client for 10 years or not? So I think that's the transition for fitness, and I think that's the healing that fitness is going through as an industry. I was just at this conference in Utah, and they had this Bang, the Bang energy drink. Have you seen this?
No.
It's like the new Red Bull.
Oh,
and there's like girls in tiny little shorts and like their tits are falling out of their tops, and there's guys with their shirts off, and don't get me wrong, like it's impressive. It activates the caveman inside of me. I'm like, yeah, cool. But what they're selling is drink this drink and you'll look like this. It's a totally unconscious conversation, and it's a disservice to the fitness industry that they allow brands like that to be in public spotlight, because it teaches people the wrong message, and especially people that are feeling insecure about their bodies. That's the last thing that we want to do for people that are feeling insecure. So, this leads to the next phase of your question, which is, what am I doing now? I've been walking, I've been trail walking, and I've been doing yoga and bodyweight exercise. I occasionally will go to the gym just to do pulling work, because we're very kyphotic in our world, driving, talking on the phone, texting, we're all caved in. So I go to the gym only to do pulling work, pull downs and lat pulls and standing and seated work where I'm pulling from different angles. But the rest of it is bodyweight squats and push-ups and going on the trails and just being in nature. I've just been feeling very fatigued lately. So instead of me going to the gym and crushing myself and being like, you pussy, just go work out harder, which was the old version of Josh, I just let that go. I don't fight that version. I just let it know that that's not where we are now. We're in a space of healing, spending more time with my gut dysbiosis, understanding how I can really get through that, and just being comfortable and being loving in my body. And that includes walking, doing some pulling, and doing bodyweight exercise, and that's it. But my goal isn't to be aesthetically perfect either. There are some people that they want to look ripped at 60 years old, and like my buddy Troy Casey, he's like ripped at 50, and he's doing it, man. He's in the gym every day, he's going for it. But what people don't know about Troy is that he spent 10 years healing his body to get to that place. So I don't think there's a general prescription for everyone. And the best resource I could give is Paul Chek's book, Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. It is the best, by far, starting point for anyone wherever they are in their fitness and wellness journey. So, the fitness industry is healing. I'm not bad-mouthing the fitness industry. I'm just saying my truth based on what I saw, being deeply entrenched on the trainer side and being deeply entrenched, moderating panels at CES, having conversations with these equipment manufacturers. They're approaching it from a place of, how do I sell the most possible product and equipment, not from a place of, how do we allow people to go within and let go of the weight that's not serving them. That's not the conversation in fitness right now. And there are some really conscious people that are changing it.
I've noticed a big push toward because I've never been like a sports or fitness dude, Probably just because of the blue light in the gym.
There's always like Fox News playing on the TVs.
Oh God,
it's like
man.
Big red things like "Be afraid."
It was funny when I was at Rhythmia. Everything was so dialed. This is the place I did a report on the plant ceremony stuff, but the whole place was just dialed. Like everywhere you go, the music, the flowers, the organic food, the spa. It's just like everything is just so well done. And then they have a fitness center. I was like, not like I'm going to go work out in between ayahuasca ceremonies by any stretch, but I had to walk through there to get to the hot and cold tub.
I know what you're going to say.
And there's like CNN on 10
Fox
TVs,
News playing at Rhythmia.
I guess it depends on your perspective. To
Right.
me, CNN is the most offensive of all the news networks. Other people's, it could be Fox or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not like all of it to me is just a bunch of like Matrix shit, really. But
Yep.
I was like, oh God, it was
pretty much what it is.
It was so gnarly though, being in such a conscious state and just hearing "Wah, wah, wah, Wolf Blitzer, wah, 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 Trump, wah, 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 wah," and I was just like, get me out of here. Like ran out of there. And I realized, oh, holy shit, this is how a lot of people are spending every morning, waking up, going to the gym, sitting on the treadmill, watching,
So true.
literally allowing themselves to be programmed.
We're in the fucking Matrix.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We are in the Matrix.
However, and on the positive side, having been around my brother Cody for so many years, he totally bailed on the whole, traditional fitness model and went into the natural functional movement route and spends hours and hours on his joint mobility and all of this kind of stuff that's now kind of gaining a little traction. So from my perspective, having been someone totally on the outside, I think it's cool that there's now approaches and systems being presented by people that are into fitness where the aesthetic is not the goal. It's not like how good do you look, how well can you move? And that's inspiring to me. Of course, like I would love to be ripped and feel confident taking my shirt off on Instagram or something, which I'm usually not. But when I see like a good mover move, I have the sense like, damn, I want to be able to do that. There's something innate inside the human ape body that I'm in that's like, yeah, dude, your body can do that too. You just don't know it, or it's been, trained out of you by a sedentary, a domesticated lifestyle. But when you see someone who can move like an animal, that to me is really cool. And there's more people out there teaching you how to do that. It's almost, it's like, again, going back to kind of a paleo primal movement system, and it usually involves being outdoors, which is rad. And that's the workouts that I do now with my X3 bar, which is, I guess, probably not very primal because paleo dudes didn't have giant rubber bands and bars and plates. But
I like hanging on a tree though.
I like it because I can do it outdoors.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And then I'll hang upside down on my back revolution, do some inversion, jump on the trampoline, move around. So I have my little thing. But it's more about like not how it looks, but just how do I feel in my body and my range of motion and stuff, which is cool to see that more people are getting into that.
It's a really easy, actionable gem. Whatever someone does for the majority of the day, if they're seated, if they're standing, do the opposite of that when you work out. So whatever position your body is fixated in for more than 3 or 4 hours a day, do the opposite. So if you sit a lot, activate your glutes with a floor bridge and then do squats. If you're standing a lot, do yoga where you're doing forward bending. Do the inchworm before you go on your walk or whatever it is. Just whatever immobile position you're in for the majority of the day, do the opposite mobile position for your workout.
That's dope.
But what's challenging is that, and so take that in, like whoever you are, like that's it, man, just do that. But the challenge is that all the machines in the gym, you sit down to use them.
Right.
And like 90% of people sit at work.
Right.
So don't do that. Please.
Right.
Like, don't sit at the gym because you just sat in your car to work, then sat at work, then sat on the car to go to the gym, and then sit at the gym, and then sit in your car when you go home so you can sit down and watch TV. Don't do that. It's
sitting in boxes.
Killing you. Yeah, it's a box
Our
life.
life is sitting in
This
boxes.
is the box life, man.
As we're doing right now. At least in the new studio, we have some natural light coming in.
Well, and after this, we're going to move.
Yeah, we will.
So,
we'll have an intermission where we'll go do an ice bath. And actually, for those of our friends that are following me on Instagram or Facebook, I think I'm going to run some live streams of us going and doing wacky stuff in our break here. I had one more piece on the movement, though, and what was it? I just kind of lost it. It is, do you know Aaron Alexander?
Yes.
Align podcast?
Yes.
So Aaron's a buddy. We've been on each other's shows and stuff. Amazing movement coach and just thought leader in that space. And a couple times I've been hanging out with him, and I'll notice that anytime he has to move like from one place to another or pick something up, or anytime he's doing something, he'll consciously do it in the most difficult way. You know what I mean? So if you have to pick something up, the path of least resistance is like bending over and just moving as little of your body as possible to get
straighten his spine, bend at the hips.
Yeah. He'll just be squatting. I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. Every move he makes is like some kind of almost yogic posture just to do basic things like plug in the mic, pick up the book, open the car door. He's always in some weird position. And then he coached me a little. I was like, what? He's like, oh yeah, dude, like you don't need to go to a gym or like go work out. Your entire day can be a workout if you just look at the way you move. And kind of along the same lines as what you're saying is like, so if what I would normally do is A, let me just really make a conscious effort to habituate myself into doing it B. So if I have to get something, I have like an under freezer in the fridge, it's like on the bottom. And every single time I bend over to get my coffee out, like I could be doing a squat right there. So imagine all the squats I could get in and not have to go to the gym or not have to work out or do squats just for range of motion mobility stuff, because you actually need a bunch of squats every day just to live, but we don't do it because we're habituated lazy apes.
And we can be habituated to be the powerful straight spine ape too.
Right.
If we train and if we engage ourselves in that dialogue.
Right.
So they're both possible, right? I feel you though, because when I drop something, I'll like pick it up with my foot. I'll grab keys with my foot and like throw it up to my hand. It's like the laziest way to do it.
That's funny. Actually, when I was at Rhythmia, one of the shaman there, he had his little spittoon. He's chewing some kind of tobacco or some shit, and he's kicking back in his shaman seat, and I'm over there like, just my face melting off, and I watch him and he's using his toe to pick up his spittoon. So he'd use his toe and he'd be like ding and spit his jungle juice out.
Wow.
Yeah, and I just sat there, was kind of fixated on him, and I thought that's really interesting. I mean, talk about the path of least resistance. Homeboy's like moving as little as humanly possible to get that spittoon cup up near his mouth.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So dude, thank you for the enlightening conversation. We've hung out a few times, and a lot of times these conversations are just me developing and budding a friendship with someone, a relationship with someone. And that's, I'm sure you share the same experience on your show, where you end up having hopefully lifelong friends with people that are on a path and are open-minded enough to consider looking at the world and the way we live in different ways. And you're one of those people. So thank you for sharing your lens with me and our listeners today. I've learned a lot from you, like I always do in these conversations. I'd like our listeners to be able to go learn from some of your mentors. So who have been 3 teachers or teachings that have influenced you in your life, that made you who you are today, that they could go look up and study as well?
God, I only get to pick 3 though, huh?
Yeah, dude.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
First one that came up was Alan Watts.
Oh, great.
And there's more information on YouTube about Alan Watts than almost anyone else. So just Google Alan Watts. Actually, on the Wellness Force YouTube, we have an Alan Watts playlist. So it's like my favorite stuff there. So Alan Watts is one. Number 2 is Dr. Dan Pardy, actually. Really powerful researcher, speaker. He has a podcast called Human OS. He founded a company called Human OS. And he developed this model where it talks about why we do what we do, human behavior. And it's called the loop model. And I think that's been a big part of how I've understood what I've done, even more so than Gretchen Rubin. And then the third, I'm going to go with Paul Chek. I'm leaving out the feminine, so I wish you could give me a fourth choice, but I did just say the 3 men. Paul Chek, because in 2008, when I had that first taste of what podcasting really was, that was the first year I started reading How to Move and Be Healthy. And I started to understand this concept of working out versus working in. And then I went down this rabbit hole of everything in our bodies connected. It was the first time as a trainer that I ever understood my breathing impacts my emotions, which impacts my body, which impacts my workouts, which impacts my life. And so those are the 3 that came up.
For the first time ever, I'm going to give you a bonus number 4.
Yes. All right.
I'm curious which feminine embodiment would be your choice.
All right. Dr. Kyra Bobinet, she was a neuroscientist that came on the show, and she wrote a book called Redesign Life or something. I forget the title of the book. Redesign Life, or 10 Lessons in Brain Science. And there was this blend that she had in the book, and I interviewed her on the show, and it was just so fascinating, to where she described the brain as this entity where if we're emotionally present in our body, we can actually rewire and recognize how to further rewire our brain. And it was the first time I had a feminine energy explain this concept to me, and it was very soothing, and it was also highly intelligent because of her work in neuroscience and designing applications for these big health companies. So the way that she articulated it from a place of, and she also has a Native American background, and there was a moment in her book where she was like, when you put your hand on your chest and you take a deep breath, that's medicine. And you don't have to go anywhere else other than feeling the warmth in your palm on your own heart and taking a deep breath, that actually helps you to rewire pathways in your brain because there's love there. There's peace there. You put your hand on your chest and you take a deep breath, you know you got yourself. And that narrative, the brain likes that narrative. The brain likes to feel safe. So I had to thank you for letting me do the one
That's
time
a good
ever.
one. For those of you listening and not watching on YouTube or the
Yeah.
other social channels, I just did it while he was talking. I'm like, oh,
It's
damn, that's
powerful,
a good one.
man. It's
So
powerful.
funny, dude. Every single podcast, I find a new thing. I'm like, oh, there's another thing.
Yes.
There's another. I don't like calling them hacks because that implies that they're a cheat or a
Right.
shortcut. It's just like there's a tool. There's a tool.
Yeah.
Hammer, screwdriver, hand on heart, deep breath going, you got this, kid. Really great lesson.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.